Hello guys, recently I posted this tweet as an experiment asking you to give me some code to review on this channel, if you want my advice or any suggestions how to improve your code. And I got a few applicants which I've chosen to review, and one of them will be in this video. It will be a repository from a person who created it for job application, and it is a simple CRUD to manage books using Argon dashboard Laravel from Creative Team. So this is the front-end theme. And if you register here, first I'll show you how it works, and then we'll dive into the code. So it's just a list of books. You can manage the books, you can add a new one, and then you can also archive a book. So action archive, it's soft deleting, then archive the book, then you can unarchive or delete permanently. So this is a simple thing. And let's see how this developer, more like a junior developer, performed the code and what advice I can give. As usual, I start any review with the routes, and there's not that many routes, so nothing really to comment, except for one thing I've noticed. There's a book controller, which for some reason is inside of subfolder. If we take a look at that folder, it's only book and book controller. So I probably wouldn't create that subfolder, I would put book controller just in the main controllers. Apart from that, routes are okay. And what is done correctly here, advice for you, if you have additional routes on top of route resource, put them before the route resource, otherwise they would conflict. So it's done well here in this case. Let's move on to controller, and what do we see here? Method index, getting the books, and getting the count of books. Do we really need the count? Let's take a look where it is used. View books, books. I would prefer to name the books index blade instead of books blade, but that's a personal preference. So books blade, where do we need the count here? Okay, so that count is doing plus plus. This part I didn't really understand. I tried to upload a few books and that field is 2 or 3, and in the database we have ID 1 or 2. So I'm not sure about the purpose of this field, but assuming it's the number in that list, there's a special variable. Maybe the developer meant loop. There is a loop variable in every for each blade loop, and then you can put an iteration, which means which iteration from that loop it is. And then you don't need to pass anything here, like this. And if we refresh the page, it shows 1 or 2. I think that's what was meant here. Also here I've noticed in the controller every method starts with comment. Not sure why, maybe it was used for to-do list or something, but just for cleanup I would delete that. Now let's get into more interesting part. The create form is pretty cool, and it uses jQuery to save the data, so it doesn't just post to store method. And there's also a JavaScript validation, so if you save book, there's a sweet alert error happening. If we take a look at create blade for this, form is just with ID create book, so form doesn't really post anywhere. And if we try to find create book down below, there's a function in jQuery. On save book, click, disable the submit button, that's cool, and then populate the form and post it. And this is one of the reasons I am not a big fan of jQuery, the old way of doing things. If you have more complex logic, it should be done better in some kind of framework, whether it's Vue.js or you may use Laravel Livewire for that, because in here there's not a lot of structure and it's hard to read the code. Even for example validation, right? So validate form, what is inside of it? We're doing each of the data field and checking if it's empty. That could be totally done shorter in Vue.js. And by the way, this is also the reason why I'm not a big fan of overriding default browser behavior. Like there is a form with post and there is a required on each field, but that required doesn't work because that post form is not really posted. It's overriding the default behavior. But okay, maybe it was part of the job description here. So there is validation and then we're posting the form. We're populating form data. Again, it could be done in a shorter way without separate variables. But okay, we're posting to the books store. And then on success, we're checking if the data status is 1. We will see in a minute what that means. Then we show sweet alert success and we'll redirect back in 3 seconds. Otherwise, we show the error and remove the attribute for disabled. Here I would like to emphasize the code formatting. It's pretty hard to read which one belongs to which one. And especially I see that in junior developers code formatting is not that readable. Maybe on their machine it looks well in their IDE, but in my PHP Storm it's pretty hard to read. So advice for you probably is to take care of code formatting, and IDEs like PHP Storm or VS Code totally have that automated formatting. So in PHP Storm I click Command Option L from what I remember, and it formats it in a more readable way. Now let's take a look what's inside of that route book store on the backend. Okay, what do we have here? Store book request validation. Okay, rules. Great. So if the validation happens, then probably in create blade, this one fires. So on the error, we're parsing the errors with response text and putting the validation rules. So let's try to validate some rules. Store book request. Let's try to not upload front cover or something. Fake filler. Description. Save book. And there you go, we have the list of errors, and now that error disappeared with sweet alert. I'm not sure I would even show that sweet alert because it's properly shown here, the errors, but okay, that's fine. So the validation works. Moving on to controller, assigning the variables. I'm not a big fan of those variables, to be honest. I see that those are used later, so I'd probably change that to, instead of all of those title, description, publisher, and date published. So this one, I would probably do something like request validated plus whatever additional things you need. And then we have shorter controller. Okay, moving on. If new book false, then it's an error. So maybe there could be an error with saving the book. But in my opinion, the validation already covers everything that could go wrong. So this is kind of not needed in my opinion. And even if it does throw some error, then the error is not status 200. It should be 500 or 400 or validation 422 something. So it's returning the error, but with status code OK. It's a typical mistake for APIs for junior developers, returning the error with some kind of status variable or message, but not returning the status code correctly for the front-end client. Okay, and then we return success. I probably wouldn't even have that variable. Why we need temporary variables if we can do something like this? We remove that. So it's a much shorter way. Now let's take a look at the show method, and here's something interesting. There's find by UUID. What is UUID? If we take a look at the books list and click view book, the parameter is not ID, it's UUID. And for that, the package is used. If we go to composer.json, you can see a package called binary cabin Laravel UUID. And if we load that in the browser, it's a wrapper on another package, and it takes care of saving those unique UUIDs and then finding by it. So a few methods, and then all you need to do in your model, use traits. Let's open book model. In here has UUID, all it's needed. And let's stop and take a look at the model for a second. First thing I notice is created at and those updated at and deleted at should not be fillable because they're fillable by default and they are set automatically by Laravel. And then I see a few functions like get front cover, file path, download link. Probably it could be done with accessors, Eloquent, or to be honest, I don't see much reasons in those functions because this function is not really shorter than adding this wherever it's actually used. So getting front cover, maybe the goal here that it's used in a few different places, and then when you want to change that parameter, change the URL or some logic here, it would be stored in one place in the model. Maybe that's the reason. Also code formatting, empty line here, but no empty line here. It's kind of hard to read. I know it's a small thing, but it's kind of getting in the way of me reading the code properly. So imagine your teammates or whoever is reading your code in the future, you are writing code not only for the compiler of PHP and Laravel, but writing code for other people to read in the future, or even for yourself to read in the future. And final thing, I took a look at blade files. It's all pretty cool here, all is working, except for one thing I've noticed. The method URL should not be used. It's working, it's okay, but a better way is to use route names, especially when you have books archive name in the web PHP. So you have books archive here. So why don't you do route books archive like this? Same here, route books create because it uses route resource. And what is the benefit of using route names over URLs? I have a separate video on that. So at the end of this video, in the top left corner, you will see the link there. And that's it for this quick short review of junior developer code. It's all okay, but I have random tips along the way. I hope it's helpful somewhat, and you learned a few lessons on how to do things or maybe how not to do things. I'm planning quite a bit more of code reviews, both juniors and seniors, on this channel, so subscribe to the channel, hit the bell notification to be notified of new videos, or you may subscribe to my weekly newsletter, where I send the links to the YouTube videos from that week, or links to other Laravel articles which I find over that week. So join 5,000 subscribers and be notified every Thursday about new stuff, and see you guys in other videos.